The Anatomy of Life podcast is where we delve into the elements that shape our existence. This is your audio guide on all the building blocks of your life: relationships, purpose, your mind, body, and everything in between. Because at the core of it all is health, the foundation that shapes how we live, we grow, and thrive.
Now, it's been a minute since I released an episode. I took a bit of a sabbatical after the last one. And while it feels good to be back, this episode leans to the darker side, though there is hope glimmering at the proverbial end of the tunnel. After taking some time to process and digest, I've spilled my thoughts on paper. I've taken to my mic because it's the only way I find is the best way for me to process things. This episode centers around trauma informed living, nervous system support, emotional resilience, and global citizenship, all core to my identity and my message. I'm Lexi, and this is the Anatomy of Life. Dear Diary, the chokehold and the gut punch we didn't see coming, we stepped into the emotional aftermath, not the headlines, the heartlines. What does it mean to live far from home when home might not be safe either? What toll does uncertainty take on the nervous system, the family unit, and the psyche? We sat on the edge of something we couldn't quite name. The silence before impact, the shifting before the story breaks. And if you're an expat, this story cuts differently. It's fear wrapped in confusion. It's WhatsApp groups lighting up with panic, embassies sending up warnings, and airports closing. It's wondering if you should pack a bag or unpack your courage. This is not a political episode. It's a human one. Because the anatomy of life includes fear, it includes resilience, and the stories we carry in between. Sunday, June 22nd. We're getting ready for the day. It's a beautiful day here in Ibiza. This is our favorite destination at the moment and third time visiting, with our second time in the same hotel. But as beautiful of a day as it is, with the crystal blue waters, a spread made for kings at breakfast, and the smell of suntan lotion, news breaks that Qatar Airways had changed its summer flight schedule effective immediately. And I think to myself, why would they change their flight schedule? Could it have been that they cited potential regional instability? I didn't read further. I couldn't. I knew if I did, I wouldn't be okay. Then whispers of the US and UK embassies in Qatar issuing shelter in place warnings to their citizens and to remain alert and avoid unnecessary travel. This coming after the US had launched missiles at the Iran nuclear facility earlier that day. We're trying to move through the day, but there's an elephant in the room. We've looked forward to these massages that we booked at Six Senses. And so we're at the pool, we're trying to relax, we're trying to distract our minds of what's going on back home. Listening to the seagulls, they're in the distance. Music faintly coming through speakers and people all around us, unbeknownst to them, that the two of us, the two people right next to them, who aren't certain what the next 24 to 48 hours might look like, will it still be a European summer vacation or a scramble to find the fastest route back to home that might not be safe? We're wrapped in towels, but we're also wrapped in uncertainty. We don't know anything yet. And the sun keeps shining. The water keeps glistening. Laughter carries in the breeze, yet none of it touches us because our minds are 4,500 kilometers away, scrolling news updates, checking embassy alerts, trying to make sense of the silence coming out of Doha. I messaged my mom late on Sunday evening.
Hi, Mum. Have you guys seen the news? Yes, we've been watching the whole day. Are you guys able to get home?
She means Qatar, because that's home for us now. There's no siren, no headline big enough to match the quiet panic that settles into your bones when you realize your reality has split from everyone else around you. The world keeps turning, and we sit suspended, half here, half there, wondering if we'll soon need to run toward the place everyone else might be trying to leave. Monday, June 23rd. The fear realized, the penny dropping, that awful feeling in the pit of your stomach. You know the kind if you've been through a traumatic event. We see news that Iran launched ballistic missiles targeting the US military airbase in Qatar. Let's pause there. On June 14th, it's almost midnight. We're waiting to board our flight to Spain. What a blessing to be on our second vacation for 2025, and we weren't even halfway through the year yet. But for days now, there has been this cloud hanging over us, an elephant walking beside us so big you'd think the world could see it, but no. We're headed to Ibiza. It's 5 or so hours away from our now called home Doha on a summer holiday. Already our flight into Spain will fly an alternate route, avoiding the airspace around the region. Surreal feeling, I'll say, but that wasn't going to stunt our well-planned trip to our favorite destination. We'd worked hard, we planned well, we invested our hard-earned money into making memories. So the excitement and the anticipation of summer days ahead of us were palpable. But so is that elephant chained to us. Fast forward to Monday, June 23rd. It's about 9:59 a.m. in the morning, and I'm responding to a voice note from my mom.
Hi, Mum. Yes, so we have been keeping an eye on the situation and our flights. So our flight back to Doha has changed. We leave a little later now, but it still looks like we can get home to Doha. The South African embassy has urged all South Africans to register at the embassy, so we're going to do that as soon as we arrive back. But we're hopeful that things will settle. It's a bit tense in the region, but let's hope that the world leaders can do something about it here, keeping it all under control. I'll keep in touch with you guys. We have a mini plan in place, but I'm pretty sure we won't need to use it. Have a good day. Love you.
We move through the day, and my message to my mom lingers with me because, as upbeat and positive as I tried to sound in that message, my intuition was gnawing at me, saying something's coming. It's early evening now. More developments have come in, so at 7:21 p.m., a mere 9 hours since my last message to my mom to say everything should be okay, I send her a text to say,
Qatar shut the airspace, so we don't know if we can get out of Spain on Wednesday.
My mom replies,
Oh my gosh. What's your next move? Can you get to the consulate?
our next move. After all the trauma I've endured since I was a child, that's all I knew was to have a next move. Constantly in survival, looking for safety at every corner. She tried to WhatsApp call me, but I was brushing my teeth in preparation to leave the hotel for a reservation. 7:39 p.m. 17 minutes later. It had begun. I forward a video of myself to my mom and I say,
Videos coming in from our group. This is currently happening in Qatar.
and she responds,
We're watching it on Al Jazeera.
we can do nothing more. So we head to dinner. And at the same time, we have friends leaving Paris and are currently in the air at the time of the missiles. And they send us a voice note from the airplane, allowing us to listen to their captain saying that they're going to be turned back. In the meantime, my survival warrior kicks in and I start messaging close friends to ask for help. We have friends dotted all around the world and I reach out to look for accommodation within Europe, if need be. And our amazing support system respond instantly. We secure accommodation within another city in Spain should this all get out of hand. And the luck that remains on my side is incredible. I truly believe I'm highly favored, but at the same time, I'm tired. I'm weary of constantly being in survival mode, constantly having to have backup plans. We arrive at our reservation. We've been in Ibiza for 9 days now. We're at the tail end of the holiday and we're preparing to try enjoy the last few days and head back to home, Doha. And I'm looking at my phone. I'm unable to digest what I'm reading, what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, and my throat is so tight, my mind is shutting down. And I felt like I was in a chokehold. I was unable to move or breathe. There was no processing happening in my brain or my body. I was frozen in utter shock. Our phones continued to be flooded with videos, messages, WhatsApp groups, voice notes of the unthinkable. Multiple explosions were heard over Doha. I opened Instagram and I saw stories of friends and colleagues, neighbors and strangers, all posting from different locations in Doha of what looked like lights flying over our homes, our apartments and offices. I recognized every single place, and then I saw our apartment block in one of those videos. My heart sank. My eyes welled up and tears just streamed down my face. Never have I ever experienced such fear in my whole life. And I've experienced a ton of fear. Gosh, I almost lost my life a few years back. But this fear was the type of fear that is forced upon you by outside sources, almost to say we can take your reality and alter it into despair whenever we like, and reinforcing that we, mere civilians, are ultimately sitting ducks and feeling like we have nothing in our control. I was imagining that what if I couldn't get home and see people for the last time? What if my apartment was destroyed and everything in it and all my memories and personal items were gone? What if we were forced into displacement? We are lucky to be part of a South African WhatsApp group here in Doha, and it was flooded with messages, with people sending videos, and people were asking where others were, asking where to go, and those living alone reaching out in panic to take shelter with others so they wouldn't be alone. My husband and I, both on our phones. A rare sight when on holiday. To us, holiday is a no phone zone for pictures and videos to capture memories only. But here we were, staring at these headlines, sitting in silence, in utter confusion, riddled with undeniable anxiety and panic. I couldn't find space to comprehend anything. My body was shutting down, a feeling I felt many times before, but not like this. Not for a circumstance of this magnitude, but what was the circumstance? What was the magnitude? What was I feeling or not feeling? What is this? An alternate universe I'm in? The disbelief was so real. I mean, I live in one of the safest places in the world. How is this even a thing? Is this what this feels like? Is this what thousands of people in Gaza face every day, and many more around the world who are in war zones, in conflict areas like Ukraine and so many African countries? My husband broke the silence, and it's such a blur. I can't quite remember how we got moving again. I do remember volunteering to drive us to our dinner reservation, and that was a way to keep my mind occupied and busy. We are headed to a place called Espoldeldo. It's a quaint little restaurant on the edge of a baby cliff, overlooking Esvedra, the mysterious rock that's rising out of the Mediterranean Sea, just off the coast of Ibiza, one of Spain's Balearic Islands. It's about 2 kilometers from the Cala de Hort beach. They call it Esvedra. To me, that name sounds like a secret, and it's often referred to as the third most magnetic spot on Earth after the North Pole and the Bermuda Triangle. And even though it's not scientifically proven, people say it has a mystical energy around it. And the little restaurant, Espoldeldo, it has a picture-perfect view of this majestic rock. And this was where we decided to have some seafood paella. How ironic to be sitting at this location, a location and reservation we made weeks before, oblivious to the fact that our sovereignty would be under threat. Was it divine intervention? Is it some sort of universal pull? In hindsight, I'd like to think so. When we got to the restaurant, we got seated at this amazing little table with an uninterrupted view of Esvedra, and I just sat and stared at the rock. I took very many long, deep inhales and exhales, soaking in as much of the energy as I could, smelling the ocean breeze, the clear air, and I just sat there, looking out at the ocean, still unable to really process much, and trying to lean into the calm of our holiday. This little restaurant, it's the kind of place where the air feels too carefree to carry bad news. And the sun was dipping, music soft. I could hear glasses clinking. Everything around us said holiday, but there was no table beside us to nod in shared concern. No passerby whose expression mirrored ours. Our waiter smiled like everything was still light, still easy, because for him it was. And then the guilt sets in at that moment. How am I able to be sat here at this beautiful location doing all these things that we had done over the last 9 days whilst the world was on fire, or at the very least, be awfully close to being on fire? Not a single table around us knew how heavy our hearts were, not sure if we would be able to fly home in a few days' time, because a threat was looming over the country. Missiles were flying over Doha, and I was sat looking at a rock. All I wanted to do was scream out what was happening and open my phone to show them the videos and messages flooding into my phone of missiles and interceptors lighting up the sky. They wouldn't believe me. They would think I'm crazy, a mad woman experiencing what we only see in the movies. We received our food and drinks. Oddly enough, we received the wrong order, a different paella to what we originally ordered. We ordered the most expensive one on the menu and got a less expensive one. Was this a sick metaphor? Like we weren't meant to live one life, but got a less expensive one, and I was going to open my phone to see that none of what I saw from back home existed. How funny to be reminiscing about such small, trivial things, really. But again, in hindsight, moment for moment over those few days felt so heavy, riddled with guilt and overthinking, planning for disastrous events, and I was clutching at trying to find meaning in every single thing. I wondered if the waiters and servers could tell we were on edge. I wondered if the tables around us could hear our conversation and what they thought. Hearing things like, what if the airspace remains closed for more than a week? How do we navigate that? What do we do about our accommodation? At least we have our passports on us and access to money. Do we have access to money? Would that be something that would be affected if home was targeted by missile strikes? Should we see if the hotel can extend our stay? What happens if they can't? But they didn't. We looked around and no one knew. Dessert was served. Something that I usually indulge in, something that makes me feel better. And yet, there was something heavy and invisible that sat with us at that table. It was a quiet kind of fear, one that only we could feel. That's the thing about moments like these. They don't always explode. Sometimes they just sit quietly beside you, unnoticed by anyone. Missile strikes, attack, threats, the words that are not usually a topic at a dinner table. But here we were, talking about the unthinkable, planning our next moves. Do we go directly home to South Africa? But it was all a waiting game, the most excruciating waiting game. Yet, this was no game. This was real time, real life, real fear, real danger, and we could do nothing about it. We drove back home to the hotel at a decently early hour. On our return home, still no reports of any direct hits, but later we would actually learn that no direct hits were thankfully reported due to interception by missile defense systems. There was no panic, no crowd whispering, no sirens, just silence. The kind that only expats know when something shifts back home and the rest of the world doesn't flinch. On the same day, Monday, June 23rd, a new episode on my podcast was released called What Now? Quite fitting if you ask me, because that episode was, funny enough, about transitions in life. Coincidence? I think not, because I'll show you many things in life that you may say is a coincidence, when in actual fact, it's so truly not, but more of the greater energies of the world, God, Allah, whatever you may call it, at play, showing you the path in a weird but magnificent way. So why share all of this? Well, two things. First, I'm a health coach, and these topics carry a huge amount of relevance in the work that I do, because my clients don't just need food plans and workouts. They need regulation tools, they need breath work, grounding, and a trauma-informed lifestyle support system. I'm walking proof of this. I practice what I preach, lead by example to the best of my ability, and I'm constantly trying to elevate my awareness. I believe we are resilient by design, and perhaps, who knows, this could be a lead up to a mini nervous system support group for everyone, including expats and global citizens. And two, well, there's a quiet voice many trauma survivors carry, one that says, other people had it worse, I should be fine. But I'm done healing silently. I find this counterproductive to regaining your life. So acknowledging that while this particular event didn't happen to me physically, it happened internally, emotionally, and neurologically. People like me deserve to process. Even if I was not there, healing isn't earned by proximity or severity. It's allowed because we're human. We are allowed to feel rattled, to need rest. And it's normal to feel emotionally displaced or cracked open. And you don't have to bounce back right away. For me, the threat felt real and personal because we've built a life here in Doha. Our people, our routines, our sense of safety, and the threat of possibly losing it all affected me deeply. because it wasn't the first time I felt I would lose it all. And so I wish I had someone to talk to about it and unpack it the way that I'm going to do here. That someone gave me the language to comprehend and help sort through all of this turmoil that is happening in my body and in my mind. I actually spoke to so many people on my return to Doha, people who were physically in the country who had witnessed the missiles flying over Doha, and I tried to gauge their take on the events that unfolded. And it was quite interesting. Some weren't phased. Some were making plans to leave, and some were stuck, unable to really process and find their community or voice to hear them out. Because they would hear things like, oh, it wasn't that bad. It was so orchestrated. We knew that nothing would happen. Now, for those of us with cumulative trauma reactivation, CTR, where your body's memory gets reactivated, I'll define that later on in the episode, are not as lucky to shrug something like this off. So, to everyone feeling the aftershock in their body and breath, you're not alone. You're part of a global heartbeat that pulses with quiet strength, and a reminder that mental safety matters just as much as physical safety. My hope is that whoever hears this can feel less alone, less gaslit for their experiences, and more empowered to feel what they feel, to learn and have language on how to process and express what they feel, and learn how to move through those difficult feelings, emotions, and those body sensations. And my hope is that the tools and definitions that I share in this episode, they impact and help guide you to more stable ground when you feel you're in a mental health crisis, or that it gets shared with loved ones, friends, and colleagues who need to hear it so they feel less lonely and feel more seen. Because for some of us, moving on can take a while for others, they woke up the next day as if nothing happened. Each to their own, but this one's for those that may be experiencing cumulative trauma reactivation. And to help you understand what that is, I'm going to define it. So CTR is the body's memory. So it's when an old emotional wound gets triggered by something happening now. It's basically like stacking up traumatic experiences as if they were Lego blocks, one on top of each other, just waiting for everything to come crumbling down. So to explain the stacking, my nervous system has had to endure over the whole period of my life different types of traumas. I'm sure many can attest to their own experiences of different types of trauma. And I'm going to give you examples of some of the different types of trauma that can form the stacking effect that leads to CTR. And I'm only going to share from my personal experience. And this is in hope that it helps you identify yours or that of your loved ones. Mine happened to be a combination of childhood trauma and bullying, which is related to relational wounding, the COVID lockdown, which the whole world experienced, and that's related to existential fear and isolation. And all of those, the childhood trauma and the COVID lockdown, can fall under the category of complex trauma or CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I also experienced a medical near-death experience, which is related to the loss of bodily safety, and that can fall under the category of acute trauma, amongst other things. Now, each of these experiences leaves an imprint that can cause the human body's nervous system to dysregulate. There's one thing that we all need to learn is that your nervous system regulation is foundational health. Now, I didn't know really much about the nervous system, and I've gone through my research and I've unpacked it, so I'm going to let you in on the nervous system. There are 3 states of the nervous system. It's also known as the polyvagal ladder. Number 1 is your green light or your green flag. It is known as the ventral vagal. This is when you're safe and you're social. So think about when you're calm, you're grounded, maybe you're curious and you're open to connecting to people, you're listening to them, you're digesting, you're learning. And this is your ventral vagal, when you are safe and social. Now, the goal of regulation is to return here, to the green flag, to the ventral vagal. Now, the red flag, the red light, is the sympathetic. That is fight or flight. And that's when you're experiencing anger or anxiousness. You may be feeling restless and you're overthinking, you're coming across defensive. And that's when your body thinks it's under threat. And you can really feel that you have high energy in your survival mode. And then the third one, which is a blue flag or a blue light, is your freeze or collapse, your dorsal vagal. Think of it when your body's shutting down, or you're disconnected, or you have brain fog and you're numbing, you're feeling helpless. And opposite to the red flag or the red light, you have very low energy survival mode. And a lot of people mistake this as laziness or depression. I felt the danger, not only because of the event, but because of my trauma imprint. That's called polyvagal theory. And the polyvagal theory was developed by Dr. Stephen Porges. I don't even know if I said his surname right. But the polyvagal theory explains how the autonomic nervous system, which controls your involuntary functions like your heartbeat, your digestion, and your breathing, responds to safety or danger and threats, and how it impacts our behavior and relationships. So, at its core, your body is always asking, am I safe? And based on the answer, it reacts before your thinking brain even gets involved. Now, the story that I shared earlier, my story, it illustrated the fight or flight response, freeze response, hypervigilance, and dissociation. These are all responses that are rooted in a nervous system dysregulation. You know, my husband teases me that I'm always so observant and too vigilant. Sometimes he unknowingly uses the word and says that I'm hypervigilant. And that is due to my nervous system for the majority of my life being in a state of fight or flight, the red flag, reading each move throughout the day for the entire day for danger, and my brain always thinking I am in survival mode. Now, when your body lives in this state for too long, you dysregulate your nervous system. Why is this a problem? Well, because your body is stuck in survival mode. This will impact everything: your health, emotions, relationships, and decision making. Here's why it matters. If you're always on high alert, or if you're always shut down, and there is no in between, then you can't access calm. You can't access safety or clarity because it's your body thinking you're in danger all the time, even if there's no real threat. If you are always in fight or flight, you're experiencing the anxiety, the panic, the hypervigilance, and if you're always in freeze or collapse, you're experiencing exhaustion, numbness, depression. These experiences hijack your brain and emotions. Your thinking brain, which is referred to as your prefrontal cortex, goes completely offline. So you stop thinking logically, and your emotional brain, your amygdala, takes over. What's the result? Well, you become reactive, perhaps forgetful. I definitely get forgetful, emotionally overwhelmed, or even shut down, unable to do anything. And over time, this damages your physical health. So you may be asking, okay, Lexi, give me an example of how this affects me physically. Well, if you had the experiences I had when you are in chronic dysregulation, that will equal chronic stress, and that will equal long-term health issues. And those health issues manifest as gut issues. So maybe you have IBS or bloating. You have hormonal imbalance, which is irregular cycles, chronic fatigue, because you're always being tired, no matter how much you slept. You're experiencing sleep disorders like insomnia or waking up tired, all of which I've experienced. And I'm still working on undoing it all. You may even develop an autoimmune disease and have flare ups. You could experience heart palpitations or high blood pressure. By being in this state, you are preventing your body from healing. You don't digest food properly, you cannot repair tissue damage effectively, and you're going to struggle to detox or fight infections. Let me tell you, for the longest time, because my gut was damaged and my hormones imbalanced, and I was experiencing insomnia for close on 15 years, I was constantly sick. The common cold and flu would put me on bed rest. Fertility issues ran riot in my body, and that's because the rest and repair, your parasympathetic state, is offline. I was living reactively, not intentionally. I struggled to make aligned decisions. I was constantly leading with a rash decision, not always thinking things through or thinking of consequence, because my body became accustomed to bracing for threat. And during that time, I pushed many people away. I avoided things. I partied a lot. I overworked till I experienced burnout. And it even leads to poor boundary setting and, in some cases, loneliness. So, nervous system regulation matters. It's not just about feeling calm, It's about digesting food and life, sleeping and thinking clearly, making choices from empowerment, not fear, building true safety in the body, not just coping with symptoms. You can think of it like this. A dysregulated nervous system is like having a smoke alarm going off all day, even though there's no fire. It's exhausting, it's loud, and eventually it breaks the whole system down. So when a new global or existential threat happens, it can reawaken past survival responses, setting off that smoke alarm. And there are many people in the same boat as me. And I want you to know that you've already carried more than most. So even the suggestion that your safety or life could be disrupted again, of course your body takes notice. It has to. How else is it supposed to protect you? So let's go back to the different types of trauma. Each type has a different recovery time frame. So what I mentioned next is not set in stone, and please just remember that it varies case by case, individual by individual, and experience by experience. So roughly, if you have experienced mild trauma, and mild trauma can look like a breakup, a minor car accident, a job loss, maybe you had a brief medical scare, and if you have seeked out emotional support, it could take you weeks to a few months to recover and come back to a regulated nervous system. And then you have acute trauma. This is where you experience sudden death of a loved one, a violent robbery, natural disaster, birth trauma, or a near-death experience like I did with my blood transfusion. Now, the recovery time for this type of trauma can take between 6 to 12 months, especially when the person actively seeks help. And then there's CPTSD, the complex trauma. This is long-term childhood abuse or neglect. Maybe you grew up with an alcoholic, narcissistic, or mentally ill parent. Perhaps you were in abusive relationships, or you were repeatedly exposed to unsafe environments like war zones or an unstable household. That type of trauma can take up to 3 or more years to recover or feel the effects of recovery. Now, unaddressed trauma can remain stuck for decades. And sometimes unaddressed trauma looks like childhood bullying, medical trauma, racial or intergenerational trauma, miscarriage, sexual assault, when it was never acknowledged, never processed, or treated. And it often resurfaces later in life. When I tell you that my body has been in recovery for more than a decade, it's not even a joke how exhausted I am. My mind and body feel like it could not take much more. All it wants is safety and to not always be in survival mode and always looking for threats. My body wants to sit still, to not move, to recover uninterrupted for at least a few years. I described this to my husband in a very animated way. So I want you to imagine a soldier, but not the adult kind. Imagine a childlike soldier who's dressed in a gladiator type armor. And this little soldier is hunched over, dirty, bloodstains everywhere, and looks utterly defeated. The helmet's too heavy for the head and dragging a heavy sword alongside. This is how I felt. And I'm still in my armor. My weapons are heavy, but I'm still a soldier moving ever so slowly, hoping that I can one day lay down my sword and take my armor off. But sometimes I find myself trying to fight battles while at the same time trying to rest. You can't do both. When these events occurred in Doha, my little warrior awoke, but it hadn't had enough time to process or even rest to be fully prepared for the next battle. My last battle was a battle of two wars, being isolated during COVID and battling for my life when I received my blood transfusion. Now, the aim is to help you map your own trauma timelines. This is particularly important for figuring out why you're always tired, or maybe you're always constantly sick, or perhaps your body's always sore. You're always experiencing sleep disruptions like insomnia. This is for those who cannot regulate their emotions, and for you, the person listening for that loved one who needs you to share this episode with them. Now that you know a few types of trauma and their timeline to recovery, with a background to why a regulated system is so important, let's delve into what happened emotionally, physically, and mentally to me over that week or so, and what tools I've chosen to use to help me come back to a regulated nervous system, as well as alternative tools you can dabble in to help you re regulate your nervous system. First, There was heightened anxiety and fear. Because of the constant warnings and uncertainty, it triggered my brain's fight or flight system. People may fear for their lives in situations like this, for their families, and the unknown. They ask themselves, will there be another strike? Am I safe here? And this can manifest in panic attacks, trouble sleeping, racing thoughts. I experienced obsessive news checking. Then there is acute stress reactions. Now, because of the rapid escalation of events, for example, I texted my mom in the morning to say everything should be okay. To mere hours later, the situation escalating, my body experienced symptoms like disorientation. And some may experience confusion. Maybe you're going to feel physical symptoms like a racing heart, or you nauseous, or you vomiting. I experienced emotional numbness. Some call it denial. And for others, this can progress into acute stress disorder or even PTSD if the danger felt personal or life-threatening. Now, I was diagnosed with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, in 2009 due to an incident my mother and I experienced whilst I was still living at home. So my mom and I experienced a near home invasion. A man tried to climb through our kitchen window. Luckily, our security guard at the complex we were living in had alerted the security and police. So by the time our bodies could respond to anything, we were woken up by hearing an exchange of gunshots outside our windows. So I already had PTSD in my body's memory of a dangerous event. And I remember seeing the roof of my mom's car riddled with bullets. My mom found a bullet lodged in the roof. So hearing that missiles were flying over our home felt similar to what my mom and I had gone through back in South Africa. There is a sense of helplessness or loss of control. When the airspace closed and embassies began issuing warnings, people felt trapped, and that can evoke feelings of powerlessness, loss of agency over one's own safety or future. And this can exacerbate existing mental health conditions like depression or anxiety. And one aspect that I find a lot don't consider are the family and social strain, because parents are trying to reassure children while feeling terrified themselves. You have expats or foreign workers worrying about loved ones abroad or the inability to leave. And some arguments or emotional detachment may increase in households that are under this type of pressure. And this leads to existential dread, disconnection. Events like this can shake someone's sense of safety and worldview. Why is this happening? What kind of world do we live in? Is anywhere truly safe? And people can then tend to withdraw from others, have hopelessness about the future, and ultimately disconnect from routine, people, and purpose. Now, for expats, we can have the double displacement. And this is when expats already live with a sense of cultural and geographical dislocation. And in a crisis, they may feel neither here nor there, not fully rooted, nor easily able to return home. That fear isn't just a fear of violence, but of being cut off from borders, embassies, support networks. My fear of being cut off reared its ugly head because memories of lockdown came flooding back when my loved ones were dying back home and I couldn't be there with or for them. And the time when I was alone in a tent-like room with no one coming near me because they feared I had COVID. Isolation is very damaging. Survivor's guilt is another one that flies under the radar. When the internal dialogue says, I'm safe, but what about the locals who have become colleagues, clients, and close friends who can't just leave? Others feel torn between fleeing and staying and abandoning their closest. Then there's also loss of routine and safety. Closed airspaces, school closures, emergency alerts, all of this erode the predictability that mental health needs. Everyday life is suspended, and that fuels a sense of chaos. And these all can feel like gut punches. Now, to help clients or even myself take the first step to breaking free of these chokehold chains and come back to a regulated nervous system, we must acknowledge that they are there. So you may be asking questions like, okay, so what do I do to begin regulation? How do I anchor emotionally and physically? How do I move from survival mode to safety mode? How do I support myself when life shakes? How do I prepare? Now, earlier on in the episode, I mentioned the polyvagal theory. Now, there's something called the polyvagal theory in action. What does inaction look like? Well, first, it means responding to your nervous system. And you can practice noticing and recognizing when you're dysregulated. I noticed it. You can notice it when you're anxious or you're frozen. Then you know, okay, I'm dysregulated. And as a coach, a friend, or a loved one, you can notice it in your loved ones, even in their words or their body language. And you can assist with a concept that I've just recently discovered, the emotional first aid kit, or something that I will put together is the nervous system first aid kit. By inviting them or taking yourself through grounding practices, which can be breath, touch, and movement. Now, you would want to avoid not pushing cognitive solutions until safety is restored. And you can do this by using the tone of your voice, the pace of your voice, your posture, your breathing to co regulate with them. And here's a prompt you can use to help you. You can look at your loved one, place your hand on their shoulder, their arm, or hold their hand and say, let's pause. Can you feel your feet? Can you look around the room and name 5 things? Let's take one deep breath in and out together. And if you're doing this by yourself, this can be done by asking yourself the exact same thing. Can I feel my feet? And then proceed to take one deep breath in and sigh it out. And then perhaps name items in the room you're in or the place you're at. When you're dealing with loved ones or reflecting on your own internal world, specifically for teachers or parents, understanding that tantrums or shutdowns can be a nervous system response. It's not disobedience. So use connection first and correction second. Now, some parents are like, well, you're not even a parent, but I'm a child. And this is how I would have liked my parents to approach the situation. Try creating predictable routines and cues of safety. So, an example of such a cue could sound something like, I'm here with you. I can see this is hard. For people in relationships, when you notice when you or your partner are in fight or flight or freeze, try using the same routine, a calm voice, make eye contact, use gentle touch, and just have a softness to your presence to re-establish that connection. And the cue here could sound something like, let's take a moment before we keep talking. I think we both activated. If you're on your own and you're noticing your triggers and which state you're in, go back to this toolkit that includes movement. Perhaps you want to gently stretch, listen to your favorite music, take a walk in nature, talk to your safe people, and do deep intentional breathing. You know, something I was told a few years ago, just before I was put on antidepressants, was that I needed to learn and understand that I couldn't think my way out of dysregulation, that we're meant to feel and shift through the body. And if it weren't for hearing those words, I would probably still be on antidepressants. So, in short, the polyvagal theory in action equals working with the nervous system to bring people or yourself back to safety, back to connection, and staying present. Now, polyvagal in practice can be done through a nervous system regulation checklist. It's a trauma-informed guide to coming back to safety, connection, and self. And this is something you could keep on your phone, pin it to a fridge, or revisit when you're dysregulated. Now, to use the checklist effectively, you need to notice what state you're in before you can shift. You need to name it. So ask yourself, where am I on the ladder right now? Am I in the red flag, sympathetic, fight or flight? Is my chest tight? Is my heart racing? Do I feel anxious? Am I reactive? Am I controlling? Or am I on the blue flag, where I just have heavy limbs? I have low energy. I'm numbing. I feel like I'm shutting down. I'm hopeless. My brain feels foggy. Once you figure that out, regulation can then begin in the body. Start with the body, not the mind. And I want you to try one of these, or if you want to, you can try all of them. We'll start with ventral anchors, which is grounding. And I want you to press your feet firmly into the floor. Name 5 things you can see. Place a hand on your heart and feel the warmth. If you prefer, you can try something a little different, sympathetic, soothing. I also like to call this somatics. Shake your hands or bounce lightly, do a forward fold or slow walking, and exhale longer than you inhale. If you prefer, you could try dorsal awakening. This is where you stand in sunlight. But if you don't have sunlight, you can splash cold water on your face. Do a gentle self massage of your arms or your legs, and then turn on some music that has a slow build or rhythm. And then my favorite, reach out for co-regulation. We are wired to regulate in connection. So ask yourself, who helps me feel safe? And then call that person, voice note them, sit with them. Ask yourself, what comforts me physically? Weighted blanket. Maybe you have a pet or a cozy corner. Lie down with your weighted blanket. Or ask yourself, what reminds me that I'm not alone? Perhaps it's a prayer or a mantra or a memory or an object, because you don't have to do this alone. I really want you to try use your senses to create safety. If everything above just feels too intense, remember to use your five senses. Sound, hum, chant, play calming music, sight, look at nature, light a candle, create some art, touch, soft fabrics, hold a stone, place your hand on your belly and feel how you breathe. Smell, use essential oils, they can be very grounding. And my favorite, taste. Sip warm tea. You want to be building your daily regulation rituals. They can be tiny, regular acts, and they cue the nervous system that you're safe. So in the morning, get some morning light, breathe, have a warm drink before your screens. Don't look at your phone immediately. Maybe in the middle of the day, you want to be grounding and then reitate yourself. Where am I? Am I safe right now? And then in the evening, downshift the lights. No news after 7. Long exhale breathing. Perhaps you want to go for something weekly. Spend some time in nature, go for a massage, do a little bit of movement, and have your creative expression unfold. And finally, respond. Don't react. When you're dysregulated, practice your pause before decisions, before conversations, or self-judgment. You can ask yourself, is this reaction coming from fear or safety? What does my body need right now? And what would I offer a friend feeling this? Know that the goal doesn't always have to be calm. You just want to have connection. You don't have to be Zen. You just need to notice, name, and nurture your state. Regulation is a practice of returning again and again with gentleness. And preparedness is a health strategy. For my clients and listeners, there are ways to help you find peace and reset your nervous system in a safe and sustainable way by addressing the trauma through topics such as body-based tools, where you can learn breathwork, somatic shaking, or you can practice grounding or sensory reset. And my favorite, movement or dance. These are for nervous system regulation that will help discharge that stored survival energy. And you can also do this through cognitive or reflective tools like journaling or writing letters or affirmations that help with finding meaning and gaining mental clarity. Now, relational tools help with co-regulation, and healing can be done through connection. And this can be done by talk therapy or coaching sessions, or if possible, sharing your stories with your safe people. And finally, getting your body and mind into a safe zone. It can also be done through creative and spiritual tools that help with purpose, connection, self-expression. And these are things like art therapy, music, nature, meditation, or prayer. Personally, I do my own personal reflections. They come in the form of questions that I journal down and then I answer them. The questions for this specific instance could sound something like, what did this unexpected halt force me to confront, personally or professionally? Did it deepen my gratitude? Did it spark anxiety? Did it shift priorities? For all of the above, yes. Yes to deepening my gratitude. Yes to sparking my anxiety. Yes to shifting my priorities. And that is everything it forced me to confront. This specific coping mechanism is journaling. I did talk therapy with my husband, explaining how I was feeling and where I think things were stemming from. And then the journaling therapy became the podcast episode. I'm currently processing through my storytelling. And this is also known as somatic journaling. It's another version of talk therapy. And I'm using it to process. So thank you. You've been lending your ear to this episode, and that means you're helping me come back to safety and to regulate my nervous system again. All these are tools that can be used to help stay grounded when the news won't stop. And this is not just for expats who feel unanchored, though. It's for global citizens who feel shaken by world events, or any traumatic event for that matter. Even if they were technically safe, it's for trauma-sensitive individuals who have laid trauma and people navigating anxiety, high-functioning survival, or transition. I want to create an accessible wellness without borders concept for everyone within my reach. I want to help others find health rituals that they can travel with. And what happens when you are regulated again? When you've come back to safety? This is a great time to ask yourself what it felt like to finally move again. And perhaps go a little deeper and ask how you carry that experience now. Did any relationships, insights, and stories come out of this experience? The anatomy of life isn't about having the answers. It's about learning to breathe in the pauses between them. And that's the strange thing about being far from home. Sometimes your heaviest moments happen in places built for joy. But the beauty of being human is our ability to practice being rooted within, to learn to regulate in unstable times. Being a health coach has become more than just physical and nutritional. It's about being a coach that is trauma aware. We're near to wrapping up this episode, but before we do, I want you to remember that trauma doesn't care where on the map you are. It doesn't wait for proximity or permission. It lives in your body and it remembers everything. What unfolded around June 23rd wasn't just a geopolitical event. It was a deeply personal rupture, especially for those of us with histories that have trained our bodies to stay on alert. We carry the weight of invisible wars, old wounds, and present-day uncertainties. And for expats, for global citizens, for the trauma-informed and trauma-sensitive, this weight is heavy and real. But this episode wasn't just about fear. It was about reclaiming regulation, agency, and softness in the midst of survival. It was about reminding ourselves that healing isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. Nervous system education isn't a trend, it's foundational health and storytelling. That's medicine. So wherever you're listening from, whether you were directly impacted or felt a ripple through your nervous system anyway, may this episode give you language, tools, and most importantly, permission. Permission to feel, permission to rest, and permission to begin again. This episode wasn't just catharsis, it was me healing in public and creating brave space for others. This podcast is set to become a living library of nervous system education, emotional intelligence, and resilience training. One last piece I wrote was this: a letter to the silent trauma. I wasn't here when it happened, not when the sky lit up, not when the sirens started, not when people in Doha looked up and held their breath. I was on holiday, technically safe, and yet my body knew before the headlines reached me, a tightness in the chest, a familiar bracing in my breath, and I've asked myself, why does this feel so deep when I wasn't even there? Maybe it's because I've lived many versions of crisis before. As a child, where silence meant danger. As a teenager, when being different meant being broken. As a woman with blood running out of her body faster than help could arrive. As a human in a pandemic, locked in, locked down, locked out of certainty. So when the place I call home now, even if temporarily, was threatened, my body didn't ask, where am I? it asked, "Are we safe again? Or not yet?" Because trauma doesn't care where you are on the map. It listens for the rhythm of threat, and it remembers everything. So if you felt displaced, shaken, or exhausted, even though you were far away, this is your reminder. You're not dramatic. You're not weak. You're not overreacting. You're responding from a nervous system that's done its job too many times. You're responding from a heart that remembers every close call, even the ones you walked away from. So if you need to rest, to slow down, to process what didn't even happen to you but still happened through you, let that be okay. That too is the anatomy of life. To our brothers and sisters in Palestine, Ukraine, and all over Africa and around the world who are affected daily by the atrocities we see on our feeds in the news and through stories from friends and family, I am outraged at the lack of coverage of your suffering. I hear you, I see you, I feel you. Free Palestine, free Sudan, free all of our fellow humans around the globe who are forever imprinted with trauma unimaginable to us. May your souls find peace and rest one day, and may we be around to help you pick up the shattered pieces. I urge those of you who are blessed enough to practice gratitude for your geographical luck, I urge you to listen with an open mind, with an open heart to those around you, and not just bow down to false narratives fed to you through your screens, to question on both sides what you see, what you hear, and what you feel. Not everything is as it seems. There's a fragmentation of information. And not everyone is willing to hear or bear witness to suffering. Your blind eye leaves you vulnerable to manipulation by those we have entrusted to govern our lands.
Now, if you feel called to turn empathy into action, there are trusted organizations on the ground doing vital work for humanitarian relief across crisis zones. Please consider donating to Gift of the Givers, Africa's largest disaster response NGO, bringing food, water, medical care, and hope where it's needed most. You can learn more and contribute at giftofthegivers.org. For direct urgent aid to families in Gaza, you can support Motaz Azaza's humanitarian efforts for Palestine, helping provide essentials like food, shelter, and medical supplies. You can find his verified fundraising links on his official Instagram page at Motaz Azaza. That is spelled MOTAZ_AZAIZA. Even the smallest contribution can help someone breathe a little easier tonight. That's it for today's episode of the Anatomy of Life podcast. If you enjoyed this, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. It helps others find the show. You can listen to the Anatomy of Life on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. This show was produced by me, Lexi, with music from Artlist.io. Thank you for listening, and as always, here is to your health.